This episode is sponsored by Economicon zine. Are you a fan of 80s horror but want something different? Do you like modern horror but the regular magazines leave you a bit cold? Are you a fan of that schlocky horror that no one else seems to talk about? Check out Necronomicon, the UK horror zine from Etsy.com. Just search for Necro Neil. Hi, welcome to Witchy Wednesday with the Meandering Magical Podcast. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Neil.
And today we are back in 2023 with a bang. But we thought before we go into what we've got plans for this year and everything else, we would take a look back at 2022. What a shit show that year was. I'm probably going to have to bleep that, but it was an absolute weird year for many of us. The end of the pandemic, lots of things happening. It felt like lots of things were in shift. But for us as magical practitioners, how was the year? So first of all, Neil, how are you doing right now? It is now 2023. Are you glad? Overall, are you glad that 2022 is behind us?
A bit. I mean, my year last year was fine, and then it got to like midway, and then it went absolutely mental. So I'm kind of hoping that this year is going to be just not as hectic at all as it was last year. It was just like, I don't know, it got to August, I was just ill, like with various things for, months. And then, but then it kind of turned around and I had a lot of fun just seeing friends and going to gigs and getting a cat and all that. So like a nice mellow one, I think, this year. So how was yours? But we know.
Again, it started off really okay. It started off fine, and then cancer happened and everything went tits up. Everything kind of shifted, and the year became all about that and all about health, which we'll touch on today. But I think we're talking about, I think we might sort of do a full health episode coming up. But yeah, stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, ding your bell, all of those things on YouTube, and follow us where you get your podcasts. So then let's talk about last year. So I guess for me, the headline was the cancer. So if you have been following the story, then you'll probably know. But if you haven't, last year in March, I discovered that I had bladder cancer, which then meant I had 2 surgeries. And lots of healing involved in between. And the first lot of surgeries was incredibly tough, incredibly hard, lots of in and out of hospital. Really not good at all, really, as far as it goes. And everything was just a tough year. And of course, that then impacted on my mental health. It impacted a lot on my magical practice. And that pretty much for me, when I think back about what 2022 was, I think I started the year and I had all sorts of plans. So I was starting with a witchy shop. I was wanting to go back to the psychic fairs and do all of that lovely stuff. And all of it just got curtailed. The cancer just took priority over everything. And that pretty much, just became 9 months of hell, really, which we are now on the other side of. So the update to all of that is that after the 2 surgeries and all of the chemo, and then for 3 months living with the being told that it was back, turns out it wasn't. We're okay where we are. We've got more testing to come in the middle of this year. So between now and then, we're just ploughing on, all systems go with everything, which is one of the reasons why the podcast was a bit hit and miss last year. It was like we missed a lot of days just because, I had my health issues, you had your health issues. And it became very difficult to sort of coordinate schedules when we both weren't feeling like shite, to be honest. But I mean, there was lots of other stuff that happened as well. So in terms of my mental health, really understanding that I am 100% ADHD. I'm just waiting for the diagnosis, and having that pretty much confirmed by counselling specialists and things that I was going to for the cancer stuff. And then the year ended rather shockingly with a whole, how can I put this politely. It ended being let down horrendously by people that I thought were friends, which took a while for that all to break down, and to sort of come back in as well. So yeah, so quite an eventful year, really. Overall, quite an eventful year. There was quite a bit of magic involved, so there was a lot of stuff that we were doing. You know, there was quite a lot of magical energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's
In a
like,
very
how do
different
you
way.
work? How do you work magic into, when we had a shit show of a year? Like, how did we manage to work magic into it? Because I mean, when there's enough stuff going on, like, you're not really gonna be thinking about your practice. But how did you kind of work in doing magic during all that?
So for me, I guess it was all about my health. So I suddenly, we were talking before we started this podcast, and I was saying I didn't really learn much, but I guess actually I did, because I did kind of do a bit of a shift in focus. I'm even happier now in that liminal space, in that space between kind of, even between life and death. It's kind of like I've had that moment of, you know, this could be it. You know, this could seriously, this could be 5 years time. I might not be here. So I've been in that place, and now I'm not even out of that place yet, because we're still waiting. I've got to go, you know, another sort of 18 months or so to get the all clear. So we're still in that liminal space. So there's been kind of a shift happening in terms of my acceptance of liminality, which for me is a massive part of who I am. But when we're talking about my health and the magic that's been involved, like I just went full on. I mean, we'll talk about it in a future episode, but I've always been one of those people who's always said, you know, if you're poorly, you can't practice. And I've always believed that, because that is always like, you know, that's the understanded knowledge that's passed down, you know, from on high, from the Silver Raven Wolves and the Scott Cunninghams of this world, who wrote the books that, you know, modern witchcraft is sort of dependent on. But actually, I don't necessarily think that's true. And again, we'll get into that a lot deeper on the health episode. But yeah, so I think for me, my practice became lots of health related stuff, lots of focusing on internal energies, connecting to like wider universal energies, really focusing on things with the dragons, as I call them, the elemental energies that I work with in the form of egregores, servitors, tulpas. All of that is going to be another episode. So if you don't know what we're talking about in terms of egregore, servitor, thought form, doesn't it just, like, it's a whole episode to try and describe that in this one, it'd be impossible. But yeah, so reconnecting with all of that energy. And I guess for me, it was about shifting that focus and really putting into practice what I've been talking about and you know, reading about and discovering for years and years and years. And it's really been, last year was really focusing that, and I guess in a lot of ways really putting it to the test. So yeah, I mean, what about yourself? Because I know, like, you had your own health issues last year and you had your own stuff to deal with. So were you still practicing? How did that sort of, how did that manifest?
I had to kind of do a lot of stuff on the fly, really, because honestly, it was just a mishmash of flitting from one place to another. So it was things that were more prominent in my mind to do magic for was just to make those things go smoother. So, you know, things like being able to get a hotel, being able to get this train, make this surgery go fine. And it was just all about, well, what can I do whilst I'm sat on a train or something? You know, it was all just how can I make this experience that I'm having at this moment into a work of magic? How can I kind of manipulate that? Well, I mean, when it came to doing, like, when I actually got to the good bit of the year and I was concentrating more on kind of having fun and not really thinking about magic, there was kind of a lot of things that I accidentally put intent into. So I kind of learned that you don't have to, it's not all about just sitting down and going, oh, I'll do some magic today. What can I do magic about? It's more about in the moment when you need it. I just learned so much because I'm very kind of focused on sigils and doing stuff with sigils. And it kind of made me more creative, I think, and made me think more outside of my stuck methods. So similar to yourself, you kind of adapt to your situation. I think it's doesn't always have to be what you think of what doing magic is, you know. So
Yeah, I think the bunny ears of what magic is quite sorry, when I say bunny ears, I mean like inverted commas. It it's a really interesting thing, because for me it's really highlighted this conversation that I had many years ago, and I talked about it on a recent tarot live stream. If you don't know, here comes the plug. I do a live stream on YouTube on the channel Beyond Authentic Witchcraft each and every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. UK time. Free tarot readings, come and join me. But anyway, I was talking about I know, right? I was talking about this conversation I had with a friend of mine that unfortunately passed away a few years back. And the whole conversation was, is magic something you do or something you are? In other words, is it something that informs every single decision about your life? So if you're buying something in Morrison's, do you, like, subtly in the background, not necessarily in the forethought, but are you thinking, you know, actually I want to get the organic version because it's better for the environment, like financially, if it's available? You know, am I wanting to buy certain things because they have a magical connotation? Am I wanting to do certain things in a certain way because of that ethos that I live with?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that is something that really, really came, you know, home to roost last year, was this fact that it is something I do. And even when I'm not sitting down, like before preparing for this podcast, I was thinking, well, I didn't really do a lot of magic last year, did I? I didn't really do like the normal, you know, every Sabbat that I used to do. And I didn't do all of these other bits and pieces. You know, I did do a summer solstice. I did do a winter solstice-ish. But it wasn't really like every one of these events, I must do this working, and I didn't do that. But when I actually sat down and thought about it, I was like, no, do you know what? I did a bucket load of magic last year.
You did.
And it was all on the go, and it was all stuff that was needed, and it was all stuff that was like, in the moment, I needed a working, or I needed something to happen. And that is something I think when you take a step back from the ritualistic side of magic, and that sort of, you know, and it becomes a working, in the truest sense of the word, something that is working, a thing that you work with, that's when it became really, really like just an everyday practice. And for me, I think that confirmation that I've always said it's something I am, not something I do, that really did come home, especially preparing for this podcast. I mean, do you agree? Do you think that's something that for you, does that ring true?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of always stuck with me what you said about is it something you do or is it something you are? So when it comes down to like this year, how it kind of tested both of us, it kind of put us in, gave us perspective into how could I make this into a magical act, or am I choosing to do that because of my own kind of magical principles and things like that? But yeah, so we've kind of both learned a lot really this year. But I mean, the thing is through doing that and kind of experimenting quite a bit, I've had a lot of big successes this year. And I don't know whether or not, say, magic that you've learned along the way, 2022, like, did you have any big successes from the stuff that you'd come up with that you hadn't done before?
Again, at risk of going too down into the health thing, yes, like the cancer, like there was a lot of magical energy put into that. And again, I'll go into that in details on a future one. But creating Tank, like a new dragon, creating a new thoughtful Megregor Servitor Tulpa thing, a creation, and then to have as a specific dragon that is there for health needs, which I've never needed before, and having that connection with this sort of universal energy that is purely for healing, for my own good. I mean, many of you, if you've watched this podcast and if you followed this journey on this channel, you'll know that I've sometimes talked about, you know, I used to work quite a lot with auras, I used to work a lot with crystals, and I really came into magic through that slightly more airy fairy kind of element of it, but very much healing based. And then sort of through meeting Wayne and Hig and having lots of very different experiences, my practice kind of shifted a little bit. It was still healing focused, but it shifted into a much wider area and opened up like whole new realms of magic that I hadn't even considered. And so for me, like, I always knew that healing was possible, and I always knew that that type of magic was something that I was quite drawn to. But this year, like, those successes have really been down that field. This is also the year when my tarot journey has taken on a very strange sort of life of its own, which I'll come to in a second. So before we talk about that, what about yourself? What were your main sort of successes, or even your failures this year in terms of sort of your magical practice?
I mean, there's like been something that I've been working on for years, and that happened in a very big way this year. So that kind of taught me about just kind of persistence. Because sometimes I think you kind of do something a few times, and if you don't what you think, oh, I must be doing something wrong, or maybe I'll tweak it or something. And I just kept doing the same thing, and then now just whoa, like something that happened this year anyway. But also because the whole thing of kind of doing a lot of on the fly stuff, and realizing that, you know, if you put intent into certain things, well, if I do that, then things can come of it. And it's kind of learned me that, you know, sometimes like in the moment of extreme emotion that you have in, like, say, just pure joy and enjoyment of something, if there's just a twinkling of I could put some intent into this, it can be very powerful. If you put so much emotion into something that is quite fun, you know, it might have an effect. It doesn't have to be kind of like sitting down serious, like, oh, I'm going to do some magic. It's kind of learned me that, you know what, you don't have to keep sitting down at your desk coming up with sigils. And you know, like you were saying about, is magic something you do where you are?
And this is the thing, isn't it, with magic? It's like, if you put that intent out into the universe, especially if you get multiple people working together, it kind of becomes this thing, and it's incredibly hard to verbalize and incredibly hard to kind of discuss in a modern scientific way, because we just don't have the language for it. But it does become this thing other than normal life, and it's kind of takes on a life of its own. And I've noticed that a lot. There are certain things that I'll say, you know, to myself, or I'll say to other people, oh, I want to do this, this, and this. And then mysteriously, the universe will make things happen, and it's not always in the way that I wanted. I've got an example of that at the moment. So I've been volunteering recently with a food waste program, and I'm passionate about the work that we do there. And it basically, for a while, I was doing effectively full-time hours, and that was through the cancer thing. It was a good way of like taking your mind off things and just focusing. And again, with the ADHD, hyper focusing is something I've learned that I do a lot. Explains a hell of a lot in my life, but anyway, and so I hyper fixated on this, and I was focus. In the back of my head, I was like, do you know what, 2023, I want to go back to doing the psychic fairs, and we'll talk about plans for this year a bit later. And I was like, I want to do all these things, and I've got all these things that I had to put on the back burner last year that I really want to get back to doing. And then literally over the last couple of weeks, events have kind of changed to the extent where now I'm only going to be doing 2 afternoons a week. So going from, you know, at one point we were doing like 25, 30, 40 hours to suddenly doing like 10 or 12. It's like, that gives me an enormous amount of freedom to do all of these other projects that I kind of wanted to do, but because I was committed to doing this and I was so passionate about it and so hyper focused on it, it was very difficult for me to sort of say, right, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk away from this project so I can enable myself to go and do all these other things that I kind of want to do. And then all of a sudden the universe has basically gone, okay, well, you say that you want to do all this other stuff. There you go. Now you've got the freedom to do it. And it's this really weird thing, because at the time, like when this change happened, I was really unhappy about it. I was like, oh no, oh, I feel really, oh, hang on. Oh, I don't like this at all. What's happening? Oh, and I'm not one for change. Like, I don't like change. Like, barely change me knickers. No, that's not true. I do. I do. But it's one of those things where, like, change for me takes a long time to adjust to. And I was literally in the last couple of days, I've sat there and gone, oh, well, that's fine, because now I get to do all of this other stuff, and I've got the time to do this other stuff. And then coincidentally, a working that I have had on the back burner for Rufus, and it's falling. This unit here is actually behind the unit. It fell behind the unit probably beginning of last year. That is now coming to fruition as well. And it's the most amazing thing. And all of that is now possible because we've now had to take a step back, or we have taken a step back from this commitment that we had. And it's just this weird thing where the universe kind of, this ebb and flow. It's like I've been saying to myself and other people, oh, if I had the time, I'd do this. If I had the time, I'd do this. And now I've got the time. And it's like, right then. And it's literally like the universe challenging me now, going, right, you've got the time. You're learning about how the ADHD is affecting you in terms of magic and focus and all of that. Let's see what you do with this then. And it really does feel like the universe is going, over to you.
All right.
It's in your court. And I love that. I love that. It's not at all like, it's completely unexpected. And it's opening up so many new avenues for this year. But it's completely out the blue.
But yeah, you were on about the tarot, how that's kind of gone this year. Like, you've kind of progressed pretty big with that. Like, you've had some interesting things happen on your streams. And yeah. So I mean, you've been there for an awful lot of the streams. It's been a very strange thing. So for me, tarot is something which, obviously, a lot of people watching this on YouTube will perhaps know the channel mainly for in the last year for focusing on tarot rather than the wider aspects of witchcraft, because again, tarot is something that is innate and I don't have to think about. And when I'm doing the live streams, it's just let's roll. I don't have to pre-prepare. And so all of that stuff that you have to do with YouTube videos and even podcasts and everything else, all of that preparation, I don't need to do so much on a live stream. So it was easier for me to keep that going than it was, to do a lot of the other videos. So I've been doing tarot since I was about 18 or 19, I think. It's, again, time doesn't really mean much to me. So we're talking about 25 to 28 years, depending on how you look at it. And a lot of that time I've been focused on learning the cards and learning different decks and how they speak to you. And again, we'll do a whole episode about sort of in a bit more detail about how that works and how I use the dragons and things in this elemental energy. But for me this year, there's been a lot of times where I've been on the stream and some very odd things have happened. And I've been given information that is, and when I say given information, it sounds really, really arty-farty. And again, it's that thing of, it's really hard to kind of put it into actual sort of terminology because we don't have the terms. But I'll be given a memory or a thought or a feeling of something. And sometimes it's like a physical feeling will come across me. So out of nowhere, I'll get an ache or I'll get a pain or I'll have this feeling of, oh, something's really not right with this part of my body or that part of my body. And as I'm talking, it's like, this isn't me. I haven't got an ache here. Like, I haven't got breathing issues. I don't have, problems with my heart. I don't have any of these things. So where is this coming from as I'm talking about, this person that I'm reading for? And 9 times out of 10, it's been because that person or somebody that they are focused on has those ailments. So that's been a bit of a learning curve and going with it. But then there's been all sorts of experiences where I've literally been talking quite randomly and these thoughts will not, this like one word or this one phrase will not leave my head. And it's got less to do with the cards. And it's just this intuitive thing of like on one time, again, I'm not going to use names or any examples, but one time I was talking to a querent, to a person I was reading for, and I'm going, I don't want to go into this too much, but
what's this addiction thing? Like, I'm getting rehab, I'm getting addiction.
Mm.
And there's me like trying to step it back and go, it's probably nothing to do with that. You're just like imagining this, blah, blah, blah. And the other person was like, yeah, this is like absolutely 100% blah, blah. And was telling me in the chat, you know, just how exact that was. And there's been a lot of occasions this year where that psychic element has come in way above anything else, way above the cards. And it's been this real kind of learning curve of, okay, just trust that the energies that I work with are giving me this for a reason, and trust that what I'm feeling is legitimate and does have a connection with the person I'm reading for. And that's been a massive thing. And I don't quite know how that's going to plan out in 2023. Yeah. I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know whether I want to focus down sort of that road. I definitely want to do sort of psychic fairs and things, and maybe dabble in that sort of field a little bit more this year. But how that plays out and how I work with that, I'm still learning. But it's been phenomenal. It really has been phenomenal. And yeah, it's after all these years of working with the cards, and as I've developed it, it almost feels like once the 5th dragon came on board and I had the 5 elemental energies and they were all like fixed and everything was there, it's like that was the final piece of the puzzle and it opened something up. And it's a very strange situation to be in, because a lot of this is stuff that I've always kind of poo-pooed and kind of gone, I'm not sure, don't quite know what I believe.
I suppose it's the risk of thinking, should I say this? Because obviously it's just kind of personal information, but also, should I say this because I might not be right and I might offend them or go too far, or actually it's a load of shit and people go, oh, as if. So I suppose it's all going to be about getting that balance right, you know, I think.
Yeah, and it's also that thing of trusting that my interpretation of what I'm feeling is genuine, and trusting that it isn't just that, you know, I am in my mid-40s now and I do get aches and pains from time to time. I've got fibro and everything else, so sometimes I will suddenly go, oh, that's a new ache. But when I'm doing a reading for someone, it isn't that, and I have to kind of maintain that acceptance and kind of trust in my ability to intuitively understand the messages that I'm being given and kind of work with them. But the thing is, Neil, in my head, I sound like Derek Acora. You know what I mean? I sound like, oh,
I would have the fear of like, oh no.
No. And it is a little bit of that. And it's almost like, you know, I don't want to pick, because obviously when I do the live streaming, it's just me sat here with a camera, playing with the cards, like dealing with the cards and doing readings. What I don't want anyone to ever think is that I've got a team behind the scenes that are going onto people's Facebook and social media accounts and going, oh, this person asked the question an hour ago, and now here's like the team behind the scenes going, oh, well, actually, they've just posted 3 days ago that something's happening with their partner, or something's happening with this. And oh, I've just got onto and I followed the, you know what I mean? This isn't
I suppose that's the danger, isn't it, these days? You know, you think people can debunk that kind of thing quite easy. So yeah,
and it's really weird, because obviously when I do the live streams, there are a lot of scammers, especially on Facebook, that come on and go, send me a message if you want a reading. And I know a lot of those people literally do that, but obviously when I'm sat in this room, I'm in the flow. I don't have headphones on. There's no way of getting information, and I'm just interpreting what is, and I'm literally looking over there because that's literally where the dragons give it to me. They give it to me on this like right hand side of my vision, and sometimes it's like a memory. It's really hard. I wish there was a language that described it. It's like if I say to you now, right, if I say to you, Neil, do you remember when you and I were in Whitby at the big whaley things, and there's a photo that we've got with a sign, and I was dressed like a priest because, you know, it was goth weekend, and you had a hat on which I think had cat ears on it, and it was like, because it was bloody freezing. Like, do you remember that, right?
Yeah.
There is a bit of you now somewhere over here in the mind's eye that you can see the memory, and that bit there is literally where I get this, it's like a memory that isn't mine that suddenly appears. And and it can be like, I've had readings where I'm talking about this figure and I'm describing a guy that is literally, I can see this picture of this person, and I don't know whether that's like their spirit coming through. I don't know whether it is or not, or whether the dragons are just giving me like an image to convey that, look, this person, this is how you know, or this is how the person reading will recognize this, that you know who this person is. I don't know what any of that is. I don't know how it works. All I know is that somewhere here in my mind's eye, like just here, I'll get an image of someone, and I describe this person, and I remember very vividly, because I was like, it sounds almost like a generic grandpa, except they are in mechanics overalls, and there's this smell of old engine grease, and they've got this really old buggered up wrench, and it's like this old, like years old even for them, manky bit of machinery, like tool, that is almost misshapen now because it's been, and I'm describing this thing to the person I'm reading for, and they're like, yeah, that's my granddad. And I'm like, no, but like, is it though? Like, is this actually your, and I'm going, but is it? Like, I don't know if you're bullshitting me. I don't know. Like, I'm just telling you what I see, and I don't understand how that connection works. So yeah, so for me, like, that's been the biggest, I guess, step up in my regular magical sort of working, is going into that field and allowing that to happen, which I think previously I've had flashes of things like that, and I've shut down because I've been like, oh, it's just my imagination, it's just my you know, and that has been really interesting, and that journey is going to be really interesting to see where that takes me this year. And again, so, plug time. If you want to follow that journey this year, make sure you follow me, Beyond Authentic Witchcraft, every Sunday, 7 p.m. UK time. Ding the bell, because I will be doing extra live streams. There you go. Got to get that shilling, you know what I mean?
So yeah, you'll be working on that probably this year, honing that, and because you're on about doing like fairs and things maybe this year.
That was a plan that we had for 2022, because Rufus does all sorts of like weird and wonderful things, and one of his little things that he likes to do is pyrography, like wood burning and things, and I love things like this, little disc things that he makes and burns and stuff, and it's all like, so we've got this idea of basically doing a stall at some of the psychic fairs. Well, I'll do some tarot, and we'll have other bits, because we used to, obviously in 2022 we had the online shop that lasted for a few months, and then cancer. So there's lots of things that I want to bring back, like my smudge sprays and things like that are unique to me. There's stuff that I've created, and I think if we do the psychic fairs, there could be a market for it there. And it feels like if we do the psychic fairs, then that'll be a good way to really hone some of those tarot skills, plus get my name out there a little bit more in terms of building, you know, eventually maybe building it as a business, I don't know, but also to like speak to other members of the community. But also one of the main reasons for doing it, now this might be a little bit of hubris, is because I have been at many psychic fairs, right, as a punter over the years. And I remember one, again, me, Wade and Hig went, so this is donkey's years ago, and we went, and there was a tarot reader, and he basically gave everybody a card around this group. There was about maybe 10 people, and he went round and said, oh, this card means you are this type of person, that type of person. And it came to my friend Hig, and he basically said, oh, this card means you're really insular, like you're really insecure, you're really closed down, you keep yourself to yourself, you're struggling in group circumstances, you struggle out, and blah 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 blah. And it was the most general cold read ever. And then he went round, he took all those cards back, put them in the back of the pack, didn't reshuffle them, which immediately I went, right, okay. And then gave everybody a second card, and then proceeded to say to Hig, oh, this card means that you're really outgoing, you're really extrovert, you know, like you're the you like to be the life and soul of the party, you like to do all these things. And we all just looked at each other and was like, no, like, what have you just done? Because inadvertently, not only was he cold reading, but he was also, because we were quite young at the time, so he was saying to Hig things like, you know, you like to go and party when you're not at college, you like to do all these things when you're not studying, and there was all this element, and it was like, that's not right. Also, not only are you very obviously cold reading, but beyond that, you're also not actually remembering the things you've just said in the previous go round. So like, not only do we not believe a word you're saying because the card itself didn't mean what you've just said it meant, but also you can't even remember what you've just said 5 seconds, 5 minutes ago to the same bunch of people. And then he was saying, you know, I've got lots of openings today if you want to come and have a reading. There's lots of openings. I've got, and we were like, I wonder why you've got lots of openings. Maybe it's because you're talking BS. And so there's a part of me that kind of wants to go and do the fairs. As somebody who I consider myself a genuine, authentic, beyond authentic, a genuine tarot reader, and somebody who I don't claim that this comes from anything. It's just I'm able to interpret the cards, and then whatever else is happening on the psychic side, that's a whole other thing. So there's a part of me that kind of wants to go and offer people genuine tarot, like how it should be done. Because again, I've seen many readers on YouTube and on TikTok and all over social media where they are putting out tarot light. It's kind of like the introductory books, like they've all read the same introductory book. This card means this, and it's like, well, does it though? That's like one of the many meanings, but because you're all coming from the same Learn Tarot This Way book, you haven't developed a nuance or a history or a relationship with that particular card in all the various decks, so you haven't got that experience. And there's a lot of that in the psychic world and in the psychic fairs at the moment.
I mean, it'd be good, like, just going and, like, because I mean, you do all the tarot readings on Sunday, but it'd be nice to have that back and forward, like one-to-one, face-to-face, you know, and I think that would kind of add other dimensions to what you do. Like, I think that.
Well, I used to do that. I used to do that in the pre-COVID days, BC. That's what we call it now. Doesn't mean before Christ, it means before COVID. So BC, I used to do tarot parties, and I was a tarot reader in the Corn Exchange in Leeds. There was all sorts of bits and things that I used to do. I did a lot of tarot parties, actually. Halloween was always a good time for that, around sort of Samhain and the darker months of the year. And so I'm used to that one-to-one interaction. And it was actually doing YouTube that was the hardest thing, of trying to learn ways to do tarot without that one-to-one. And yeah, that was a massive learning curve. And like, I still do occasionally, like live one-on-one video reads for people. I read in person again now that everything's lifted again post-pandemic. So I do still do, you know, face-to-face reads as well. Not very often, because again, I've been focusing on other things in the last couple of years. But yeah, I just kind of have this itching, you know, this idea of a calling. It's like I just have this, it's like that's where I need to be for some reason. I don't know why, but I need to be there. So that's, you know, hopefully for me, that's going to be on the cards for 2023. So what about you then? What about you for this year? Have you got any sort of big magical intentions or big magical kind of aims, goals that you want to do this year?
Not really. I think it's from kind of learning last year about the whole thing of doing things in the moment and kind of how can I make this fun experience have a bit of an intent, or I don't know. I think with me it's just all about what do I need. Like, I don't really have a big project. I mean, I tend to, like, I read a lot of books every year, so I'm always getting through books. I have a lot of books. That's my big plan, really. Like, when it comes to magical stuff, is just cracking out more books. You know, I read a lot in 2022, but there's only like a small selection of them that was magic stuff. I mean, because I kind of pick up things, you know, that I want to learn and get into as I'm reading as well. So it's just about where it takes me. But I had a conversation with my friend's wife, who's grew up in Mexico, and I was kind of asking her loads of stuff to do with Santa Muerte, and she was just telling me some great insights, you know, growing up amongst all that. And so I feel like I've always kind of had an interest in it. So I think that's kind of something that I'd like to learn about this year, like not necessarily do, but just kind of learn about. So there's always things that I like to go down the path of just kind of learning about, really, just kind of to put things into context, and you know, so I like seeing how things kind of meet up and things like that. But I mean, there's a couple of, I mean, I'm still, you know, I haven't read every single chaos book out there, you know, so there's still like, there's a big one I've got here that's hands-on chaos magic, which is a whopper of a book. But I mean, that seems to be a bit of a dip in and out book. So, you know, I don't have to sit and read it all at once. I mean, I'd like to actually get around to reading about Austin Osman's Bears, just life in general. Not necessarily just the magic stuff, but just him as a person and an artist. I've just got this, which is another whopper. Shake the camera. Book of Lies, which is a compilation of articles with different magicians and artists, and a lot of just chaosy stuff, and you know, just people's insights into what they've done. You know, like Grant Morrison, William H. Burroughs. You know, you've just got people like, you know, Anton LaVey and Aleister Crowley in there, but you know, Genesis P. Orange, and yeah, a lot of weirdos who was into wacky magic. But I mean, last year,
I always forget Grant Morrison was a chaos.
Grant Morrison.
Chaos. I always forget that. I know him from the comic world.
Yeah, very, very interesting person. Very interesting person. I mean, I'm not necessarily into their books or anything, but just them as a person, I like to hear them talk about their wacky chaos adventures, you know, in general. But I mean, this year, I think, I'm trying to think what else I read this year. I kind of picked up on some more Taylor Elwood. I think he's my favorite chaos magician writer. There's a book about pop culture, magical systems. I read another one that was like Masterworks of Chaos, which was crap. Blood and Bones, which we've chatted about. We have some opinions about that. There was a really interesting one that I read by Damien Eccles, who's known as being part of the West Memphis Three, who was on death row for like 20 years, I think. And he got really into magic whilst he was in there, and he did a lot of ritual magic in solitary confinement. And obviously in that situation, you know, you don't have access to magical tools or anything like that. So he built his own way of doing that, and he wrote a book called High Magic, which I read. It's not my kind of magic. It's very kind of big ritual stuff, but I just found it very interesting, the idea of how you substitute things, you know, in certain situations. You know, I'm kind of interested in that kind of thing. A lot of my books to read. I'm excited for those. So, but yeah, I think I'm just going to crack on with just, you know, not narrowing myself and thinking I've got to do sigil stuff, and, you know, having more fun with it, basically. I mean, there's a quote by, is it? I always want to say Graham Chapman, but that's Monty Python. Alan Chapman. Alan Chapman wrote a book.
Chaos.
I know, there you go. He wrote a book which I didn't really get much out of, but he came up with this very highly quoted list in like chaos magic circles, which was basically something like a list of like, decide what you want to occur, then ensure that there's a way of that happening. So, you know, don't wish for, I want to have 3 heads or anything, just I wish to have money or whatever. And then choose an experience, and then decide that experience means the same thing, and perform that experience, that act or whatever, and then results. And that's always stuck with me, and I think that's been almost 2022 for me, is deciding that certain things that you're going to do could actually mean something else and have an effect, you know.
Was there anything you did sort of to mark the traditional, like, turning of the wheel, the turning of the seasons? Is there anything that you did sort of in terms of that, you know, around the end of the year for Yule and all of that, or even Halloween, things like that?
See, I don't really, but I've kind of come to this conclusion that for me, Halloween feels like the end of the year, like it feels like New Year's Eve to me. And then the period between that and February, March feels like a void. Like it feels like a very non-linear just time. And for me, when it kind of hits spring, I feel like that's New Year. So yeah, so Christmas for me is just more of a casual thing, really. It's not like I don't really have too much meaning behind it. And same with New Year's and New Year's Eve, and I don't really see it as a that's the end of the year. This is the new year, new you, and all that. I'm kind of a bit wacky when it comes to time, you know. So yeah, I kind of don't really. I'm a bit of one of them weirdos who doesn't believe in linear time and all that. But I mean, for you, do you kind of stick? Do you kind of recognise the kind of traditional, you know?
So for me, because I do live with someone who is a lot more linear than I am, so he understands calendars and time and all of that stuff far better than I do. There is that kind of element of the turning of the year. So when it comes to things like Christmas and New Year, we're aware of it. We don't necessarily go out all out and celebrate. But there is definitely a turning of the year. But I do agree with you in terms of this liminal time between Halloween and spring equinox. There is this period of time where it feels between, and that's really interesting because, again, maybe we should do a whole episode about time. Like, so for me, I did celebrate summer solstice because I tend to always do. Halloween and Samhain for me was a really odd time, largely because we were still under the impression that the cancer had come back. So again, we'll talk about this in more depth in a future podcast, but we basically, after the second surgery, I thought everything was okay, and then we were told that it looked like the cancer was starting to come back pretty much immediately. Now, in between the second surgery and having that cystoscopy, I'd been away to camp, and I'd been away to Oakcliff, which is this amazing pagan camp. If you ever get an opportunity to go, like, to anybody out there, like, reach out to the pagan camps because they are amazing experiences. Oakcliff is the only one I've been to, and probably the only one I ever want to go to because I feel so at home there. But it was an amazing experience, and a lot of that for me was tied into the cancer journey and doing ritual at camp and holding space at camp for that ritual and for that healing to take place. And so to find out literally like a week later that the cancer had come back, that almost shut down my magical faith, like the faith in the magic. It basically meant, well, hang on a second, I put all of this into the fire at Oakcliff. I put all of this into this ritual that I'd been working on for ages, and then it didn't work and the cancer was back. And so for me, all the way through until the end of November, when we had the cystoscopy that said the cancer was actually gone, that entire block of time was almost like a magical shutdown for me. It was almost like I was angry at the universe. I was angry at the gods. Like, if you believe in the gods, I was angry at the universal energy basically going, I did all of this and it didn't work. Like, what else? Like, literally everything I had went into these rituals and it didn't work, and the cancer was back. And so that period of time, that 3 months, was quite dark in terms of where my belief in the fact that this stuff actually happens is. It was kind of a real questioning time for me until we then get to November, and then the cystoscopy happens and they say it's clear, at which point I was like, oh, hang on, you mean the surgery and everything I did after actually did work? Okay, I've got some apologizing to do to the universal energies, and hopefully now I've made amends, and you know they understand, and we're cool. But yeah, there was a lot. So like Halloween for me was very much a secular Halloween. So you know, we got a load of candy for the kids. I ate a lot of it because my mental health was bad. We had kids turning up on the doorstep. I dressed up, we decorated the front of the house, all of that stuff that we regularly do. But the element that was missing this year was that connection to spirit, that connection to sort of, you know, universal energy that I normally, you know, do acknowledge ancestor work and all of that. And I you know, invoke and various things that happen around Halloween. So yes, it was a very strange one. And it was a very twisted and very dark time, because this thing that I have put a lot of stock into of who I am as a person, this thing that kind of, as I say, it runs through my DNA of magic and the craft. I felt like it had failed me for the first time
Yeah.
ever. And so for 3 months, I was like, right, okay, question everything. And then to discover that actually it all worked.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
it.
God.
Yeah, that's it.
That took about 6 weeks of
Sometimes,
getting used to,
yeah, you've got to be
literally.
patient.
It took
Yeah.
a lot of getting used to. Not the fact of being patient, it's the fact that the doctor who had seen the 2 bits that we thought was cancer coming back, it was actually something else. And when the second doctor, like 3 months later, went in, and when she said it's clear, I was like, no, I don't believe it. Show me, like, show me on the screen. And like, I can tell you where it was. It was down here, just past the scarring, like there. She went, there's nothing there. Look. And I'm like, no, do it again. Show me again. Because I didn't believe her, because for 3 months we'd have been under the impression that, you know, I was expecting more surgeries and everything else. And for me, that handbrake is, imagine being in a Formula One car and you're doing 200 miles an hour and you're going all very fast in one direction, and then you come up against like a 90-degree turn. For me, it was like I was skidding and I wasn't going to make that turn. And that's what it felt like for 3 months, that fear of this is all going very badly wrong.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, for you to go, oh no, I don't have to make that turn, actually that's the old track and I can just carry on going the way I was. That shift was, it was a head. There's no other word for it. It was a total head.
Well, I mean, with me, I tend to, like, during that weird period of time, I tend to just kind of magically hibernate. I don't really do anything when really all the time is there. You know, you're just inside. But for some reason, I just kind of don't do anything. And I used to do things for Halloween, but I feel like that kind of like death work and stuff is always kind of pretty constant almost in what I do, and I don't really feel like it's almost like Valentine's Day. You know, you shouldn't put all your love and your dedication into your partner on that day. You know, you should be doing it all the time. So when it comes to Valentine's Day, it's just another day. But so that's kind of what Halloween is like to me. I mean, obviously, I do a horror fanzine. I'm massively into horror films, so I'm going to use that Halloween to just do the silly things of Halloween. Like I love, like, I mean, you would not guess that I'm a person that actually enjoys all the kids coming around and me handing out sweets dressed as a witch. And, you know, I love it. I love seeing kids all dressed up, you know? So I kind of like just the spectacle of Halloween. I don't really practice or anything around that time. So
you, a bit like me then, you do Halloween rather than Samhain.
Yeah,
you do
basically.
like the stereotypical kind of Americanized Halloween, the modern version. So we've talked a lot about the magical plans for 2023 that we both have, or, you know, lack thereof, going with the flow, see how things are. What about secular plans? Because obviously you run Necronomicon, like arguably, in my opinion, the best 80s horror zine ever. I love it so much. So you run that and I've got the channel. So what are your plans non-magically, maybe in terms of the zine or just in life in general? What are you up to this year? Or what do you think for this year?
I mean, I'm putting my intent out into the universe for it to be a calmer year. But also I've been kind of threatening to do issue 50 for like months now. So I'd actually like to get it done, you know, get to issue 50 at last. But I want that to coincide with the first issue where I'm doing a separate run alongside Necronomicon, because for many years now I've been trying to watch every film that my mum and dad listed in their video logbook that they kept during the 80s, like whatever they rented out, they kind of kept a list. And it's been a project of mine for years to watch every horror film from it. And it's kind of, all those reviews have run throughout Necronomicon, but I'd like to actually get around to starting to compile them all into one fanzine that's separate. So I thought I'd like to get the first compilation out when issue 50 hits, just as a nice celebration of issue 50. So I'd like to pump out more Necronomicons this year, because they were quite sparing, you know, 2022. So get back to it.
So my plans for 2023 are very much focused on the channel and a little bit behind the scenes. So we're very close to the channel is very close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, which is bonkers considering sort of, you know, where 2022 was and what happened and the lack of content. So that's going to be a big milestone for the channel. It's going to be one of those things which on the surface you're not going to see a lot of changes, because it's not, I'm not going to suddenly, you know, run 1 million adverts per video, but behind the scenes it opens up lots of YouTube studio type stuff that gives me access to a lot more fun things to play with behind the scenes, which I'm really excited to do. But also in terms of like the growing the channel and moving forward with it, like I really want to focus on the witches stuff as well as the tarot stuff. It's why the channel's now slightly rebranded to Beyond Authentic Witchcraft, because it's easier to find. Like the spelling of weird, I love the spelling of weird, the WYRD, I love that, but it just makes it difficult for people to find. So by shifting it over to just Beyond Authentic Witchcraft, nice and simple, if you want to know about authentic witchcraft, this is a channel for you. So things like that I want to focus on, and also focus on like my authentic witchcraft, which isn't necessarily Alexandrian or Wicca or any of these things. It is something quite personal, and I kind of want to get to the point where I'm able to not teach as such, but kind of teach like my version, talk about my version of stuff, how I came to this new version of a working, or my personal relationship with egregore servitors, you know, tulpas, all of that, my personal interpretation of the tarot cards. So whether that turns into like a tarot school or anything like that, like I'm not quite sure where that's headed yet, but there's definitely something here that I want to really engage with, and really like I get quite a few questions from viewers from the audience talking about, you know, general witchcraft questions, but also like tarot and how do you pick it up for the first time, and can I recommend good books and decks? And it's like yes and no, because it's such a personal journey. And I kind of want to talk about that a lot more this year. There's definitely something I want to do in terms of YouTube shorts, because apparently it's going to be the next big thing on YouTube, trying to, you know, fight against Instagram Reels and TikTok. So there's content there that I want to make, and it feels like that would be a really good fit for talking about each of the tarot cards individually. So to actually go, this is a YouTube short all about the Fool, or this is a YouTube short all about whatever, and my interpretation of that. And like that can be quite a little short video. It doesn't have to be like a 20-minute video. So shorts I think will be really good for that. Yeah, so there's lots of practical stuff in terms of all of that I want to do this year. And I've already talked about like the psychic fairs and things, but on a more secular basis, like I'm back to the gym hopefully soon, depending on how my health goes. There's things I want to do, you know, in the flat, in the house. We want to get some more ratties, you know, I want to get a couple of baldy boy ratties. So there's lots of things that I want to do in terms of life in general. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me is really growing the channel and being able to focus again on the stuff that I'm passionate about, the stuff that, you know, we talk about on a podcast. And sometimes it feels like I talk to you on a podcast and it reinvigorates everything. And then this last year, I'm like, oh, I'm really excited to do something. And then I've just been too tired, too knackered, too poorly to be able to do anything with it. So yeah, I guess that's really my focus for this year. One of the exciting things that both Neil and I want to do this year is to really focus back on the podcast. So we've got some plans, we've got some aims. We really want to make this fortnightly. So we're putting that out into the universe now. We are casting it out there that this is going to be a fortnightly podcast, with the proviso that, you know, health and everything else that goes on in life's many, many wrinkles might give a little bit of a wibble to that every now and again. But we're going to aim for a fortnightly podcast, aren't we, Neil?
Yes. So subscribe to this channel, and, you know, follow, subscribe on all the other platforms where you usually get podcasts.
That is going to be all from us today. Now, obviously, go and check out Neil's fanzine, Economicon. You can find it on Etsy. Just search for Necro Neil. And if you wanted to support myself and this channel a little bit more, you can go across to buymeacoffee.com/Beyond Authentic, where you can, in fact, buy me a coffee. Full details of channel memberships are over there as well. So until next time, keep practicing.
Keep experimenting.
And join us for another Witchy Wednesday with. Bye-bye.